from the Legend of Zelda. Hello and welcome to the Curious Vlog. It's September the 27th, 2014, which means that it is time again for another exciting installment of this fantastic new series. I have recorded a number of videos over the week to do this month's vlog, and all of them have turned out not to my satisfaction. So, I'm giving it one last go. You'll have to bear with me here. I am sick today. I'm going to be a little bit muted. But I figured I would talk about the influence of The Legend of Zelda on The Curious Tale. Specifically, one very particular influence, which is, well, I hope you know what this is. It's the Triforce. It is the center of providence in the realm of Hyrule. Created by the goddesses after they created the world, and left behind as an all-powerful entity, the Triforce will grant a wish to whomever touches it. For years, I wanted some kind of Triforce analog in The Curious Tale, and I tried and I tried. I came up with a few ideas, some of which even stuck around, but I didn't get there with respect to this Triforce analog until, of course, I did. What I came up with is called the Golden Sway, or the Sway Fire, or the Eternal Light, and in fact it has many names, because unlike in Zelda, the lore, the myth, the mythology surrounding the Golden Sway is very extensive, very diverse. Something The Legend of Zelda has never had the time to do is flesh out backgrounds in Hyrule if it doesn't pertain to the story in some way. That's the common limitations on video games, and it's not so much of a limitation in books, especially a big epic cycle of books like The Curious Tale. So, in Hyrule, nobody questions the existence of the Triforce, even though virtually no one has ever seen it, let alone touched it. Its existence is not generally disputed. I don't know of any instance in the games of Triforce atheists, as it were. And everyone generally agrees on what the Triforce is. There's been some installments in the Zelda series that have played with that a little bit, like Twilight Princess was very indirect about the Triforce. But for the most part, the Triforce is always the same thing. It's these three triangles left behind by the goddesses. Touch it, you get a thing. On Relance, the Sway Fire is not so uniformly perceived by the cultures of the world. First of all, I'm not actually going to say for reals whether or not the Sway Fire exists as a physical entity the way the Triforce does. Finding that out is a part of After the Hero, and the nature or lack thereof of the Sway Fire is an interesting matter for the plot. But what is true is that people perceive it in countless different ways, both on the national level and on the individual level. So, for instance, on the national level, in a place like the commercial metropolis of Soda Fountain in the desert, they aren't generally too interested in the Golden Sway. They use it as an expression of good luck, but don't treat it as though it were something out there. Whereas a little bit farther north, in the Kingdom of Devorange, they treat the Golden Sway with great reverence, and don't generally speak of it except in reverent tones, because for them, the Golden Sway isn't its own tangible entity, but rather is an aspect of the goddess Dorishos. Specifically, it is the light of her compassion and the center of providence, again, as it were, just like the Triforce. It's anyhow, in places like, for instance, in Gala, with their vastly greater knowledge of the distant past, there is less of a tendency to accept the Swayfire as something God-given, and more of a tendency to imagine that it is either symbolic or something that can be built by great nations. And in places like, there are some places that know the truth. In Junction City, the sorcerers know. But just about everywhere else, they don't know the truth, and so speculation runs wild. For some, it's a symbol of good luck. For some, it is an aspect of one's own goddess or god. For some, it is a touchstone of achievement, something to be aspired toward. And of course, individual attitudes on the Swayfire are even more diverse. I won't get into those because the video is already running long, but if you want, you can chat me up and I'll be glad to talk about it with you without spoilers. So, excuse me. There are some common threads or some qualities of the Swayfire that are more commonly embraced by Relansi cultures. Doesn't necessarily mean they're true. And I should add, just for the record, that just because any one culture, like the Galans, whose side I often tend to take, might have a certain view of any given matter, it doesn't mean that that's actually the truth. The Galans get things wrong too, and so do individuals. So do people like Galavar and Silence themselves. Because to err is inevitable. There is no such thing as being a mortal, ignorant being and being flawlessly correct. So, one of the more common perceptions of the golden sway is that if you can touch it, it will grant you a wish. And that is the theme that I really wanted to take from the Triforce. In many other respects, the Swayfire and the Triforce are very different. But in this respect, there is this common belief on Relance, and it's not universal, but it is fairly common, that if you can find the Swayfire and touch it, you will get a wish. And the reason I wanted to take that from the Zelda series is because to me that is an amazing story device. Think of it. You can touch this and have anything. That's a rich source of story fodder as far as I'm concerned. So you'll have to bear with me here. I'm sick and I'm a little brain addled, and my line of thought constantly derails. This belief that touching the golden sway will grant you a wish, of course, isn't universal. There are people who believe that the golden sway doesn't have a physical existence and therefore cannot be touched. There are, of course, people like the Devarangians who believe that it is an aspect of the goddess and something that one touches continually, as you will hear many religious people say in this world, with respect to knowing their God. But it is a fairly common belief. It's the stuff of legends. It makes for good stories. Out there somewhere, if you can find it, and many have tried, but none have succeeded. But if you can have your wish. What would you wish for? What would you wish for? If you could have a wish, no shenanigans and no chicanery, no reservations, a wish that would grant you anything. It's an interesting question. Another common perception regarding the golden sway is that it is the essence of the kindred and of other sapient creatures to some extent on Relance. Here in the real world, we have the concept of the soul. That concept also exists in some places on Relance, but more common is a belief in the spark. I've talked about this on my journal. The spark is a symbol for the passion that drives a person and makes life meaningful beyond a simple exercise of self-maintenance and replication. People on Relance, throughout Relance, there's always some variance, but this is a pretty common belief. People commonly believe that the spark of life is real and dwells inside most people. There's a twist in that the spark is also literally real in Relance, and you can see a person's spark under the right circumstances. So it's a symbol for most people because that's all that most people will ever know it as, but it is also a real entity, and that factors into some of the stories that you'll see someday. If I don't die from this gastrointestinal firestorm. Oh, it's horrible. I've got a fever, my head hurts, and everything. So, another common belief, like I was saying, is that everyone is connected to the sway fire by their spark, and that the sway fire is a fundamentally greater object in the same class as people. That's more widespread even than the belief that touching the sway fire will grant you a wish. That's very widespread because the myth or the tale of the spark is so widespread, and the people's understanding of the sway fire often goes through that channel. We all interpret other people's work in our own way. One of the reasons that I like the Triforce so much is that, to me, it is some of these things that I've been talking about as regarding a person's spark. It represents passion and potential. In fact, when this hasn't actually happened yet, but if someone were to stop me on the street and ask, "What is this?" I would try and tell them that, to me, this is a symbol of humanity's passion and its potential for using power wisely and courageously for good, which, if you know the Legend of Zelda, will make a lot of sense to you, and if you're familiar with my work, will also make a lot of sense to you. So I see in the Triforce some things that aren't necessarily intended to be there, and have put those thoughts into the sway fire. And it's been very fun for me to explore different characters and different cultures' understanding of the golden sway and their relationship to it. A golden sway and the sway fire are the most common terms, like I said, but also, like I said, there are many others. They're the ones that I use. Sway fire is the most common, and golden sway after that. So I think that will do it. I'm out of my time anyway. And I've recorded so many videos this week, and I think this one will finally get there. So that makes me happy. Leave a comment, ask a question. I love questions. If you don't, I will haunt you. And until next time, here is wishing you and yours a lasting and curious tale.